sponsors of this exhibition, the Alan and Isabel Dervisarian Foundation, and Isabel is here, actually. Thank you, Isabel and Alan. We're so grateful. And another sponsor is Carolyn Bugart, who's a trustee of the museum, and her parents' names are on the building, Stephen and Marion Bugart. We're just so thankful that they would support this exhibit of Serj Tankian. They did it very, and there was a lot of momentum to put this show on. So we're really excited about that. So Serj's tour, I'm sure most of you know, ended last night in Toronto. So they played the last concert. We were due to fly here this afternoon, and all of the flights to Boston were canceled due to the weather. So it's really unfortunate. We're going to do our best to reschedule him to be here in Boston. This show will run through February 28th, so we hope that we'll have a chance to see people and host other events in the gallery. And he also sent a video message from the Toronto airport, which we posted on our social. So I mean, he's really excited about this exhibit. I'm excited to talk about it with Ryan and Amanda, to talk about how we put this together. All of the pieces in the show are actually for sale, and Serj is donating the proceeds of the sales to the museum, which is amazing. So there's price lists around the galleries, like on the benches. And yeah, I mean, I might add a few more things, just talking about Serj and his connection with the museum and how the show came about over the course of the last, few years. But for now, I would like to introduce the curator of the show, Ryann Casey. And Amanda Cantillon, who also helped mount this exhibit. They're both based in Stockton University Art Gallery, and Ryann has curated the last handful of shows here, 5 or 6 shows. The last one being by the large paintings of hyper-realist art by Tigran Sitoksian, who's also here from New York. Tigran,
it's very
shy. So with that, Ryann, we wanted to give you a chance to sort of talk us through this gallery and the way you curated the show.
Sure. So everyone hear me okay? Hi. Hi, everyone. Hi. So this is our fifth exhibition. So as most of you know, once you exhibit in a space over and over again, you're kind of trying to find new ways to create a space that's independent and unique to that specific exhibit. So with Serj's work, what I really wanted to do is to approach it in a slightly different way than I had before. A lot of the work I've done so far focuses on the visual art. And so what I wanted to do is sort of mix in things that he did in other avenues as well, like thinking about him as a creative voice, as a musician, which obviously all of us know that part of him, but also as a poet, which that's why you can see poems throughout the exhibition, including the wall behind me, as well as his visual art. And what I wanted to try to do is really connect his creative process to all of those things at once. It's somewhat rare to find someone who's sort of intermingling all those different creative ventures into the kind of the same space. And so that was my approach to it, is how do we use the space to showcase each of those different types of creative activity. And so what I really hope you kind of experience with it is that this is as much about visual art as it is about music, as it is about poetry, and about him as a person. Because, one of the things that I really respect about him is that everything he feels and everything that he believes in, especially in terms of his activism, is built into his visual art, is built into his music. And so how do you express that in an exhibition? And hopefully through the use of words, music, and also, again, the visual paintings and prints that we have, you get a sense of kind of who he is. One of the things I thought was particularly unique about this, and this is definitely in line with some of the conversations we've had about his work, is that, you know, for each individual painting as well as the prints, there is an app where a specific composition that he's created for that piece can be played. And I think that changes a little bit of how you view the work. A lot of times when you look at visual art, it's silent, right? That's a big part of that. Not always. There's lots of artists who sort of explore music as a part of it. But a lot of times it's silent. In a museum, it's silent. And I think that's a really interesting way to show it. But I also think, on the other end, having music as a companion to visual art, to each individual experience, especially since those experiences tend to be, at times, really intricate and complicated, especially when you have pieces, for example, on the prints, you have things like Grieving Banner that talks about a lot of his expressions on the Armenian genocide. I feel like having these additional components to broaden your experience as a viewer is actually pretty important and pivotal. And so that was a big ask on my end, like how do you create an exhibition that does all those things? And I hope that you all have that experience as you look at the work. And also to understand that, you know, we sometimes detach the person from the work that they create. I don't really think that's possible in this case. Yes, it's abstract work, but all the work is about him and his experiences, his ideology. And I think without that, we don't really understand it. So I hope that through all these components together, we get to see a little bit more of who he is and to see his process. You know, at least that was the goal. I hope he did it. Yeah. So this is Amanda. Amanda has been working with me as a curatorial assistant and part of my curatorial team at Stockton for 2 years now. And so when we create exhibitions like this, you either do it by yourself, which is usually what happens, but in our case, we have a really amazing team, and so Amanda did a lot of research, including listening and reading his autobiography more than once. And so, do you want to talk a little bit about how you saw his work? And
so for me, it was different. I grew up as a teenager when System of a Down was in their heyday, and so that was a big thing. And listening to what he's creating now, like composing for each piece, gives such a different layer to the human being that he is with it. And we don't normally get that. Working in museums and galleries and everything, it's just, there's a lot of internal thought and viewing, and while we may be in awe and wonder of the art in front of us, it's usually not one that we could connect so truly to the artist.
And I'll add that one of the things that we do as a team, and we also have another team member, Allie, who does this as well, is that I don't approach curating as an individual job. It's something that we are part of a team, but it's also involving the artist. I believe curation should be collaborative, that you should listen to the artist and who they are and what they're saying, and that should be as much of a inspiration and a focal point of how you launch an exhibition like this as anything else, as the art itself. And so one of the things that we try to do in a lot of our exhibits is allow the voice of the artist to be prominent. Not my voice, not our voices, but his voice. And so I hope as you go through it, you start seeing that, his voice becomes a really important aspect of your experience. And so that's something that, I know a lot of times curators are a little bit possessive about the text. I really am not, because I really do think to understand the work, you have to know the artist. And so hopefully his voice becomes a really important aspect of your experience too.
I wanted to reflect also a little bit, there's a case of
Right.
material about Serj that we put together, just sort of a snapshot of different aspects of his activism and his music, and it goes well beyond System of a Down. And I mean, Serj and I have worked on a lot of projects together over the years, and I mean, my son, Robert, asked me last week how we became connected, and we had a lot of common experiences growing up involved in Armenian advocacy, and so we were always interested in political aspect of Armenian work. And when one of his solo albums came out, I remember in an interview, he he had this statement where he said the message is more important than the music. And he and I talked about that a lot because he knew that I loved his solo band, but that the music with a message was really important. This political music that we all listened to growing up in terms of like punk rock and hardcore. So we had a lot in common just in terms of like Armenian advocacy and, you know, American culture that we grew up with. And when Serj came, Serj actually worked on a rock musical at the American Repertory Theater in Cambridge called Prometheus Bound in 2011. So we really connected then. We brought him to Watertown a few times and spent more time together while he was here composing the music and in rehearsals for that musical. And while he was here, I said, Serj, this was before I came to the museum, but I said, Serj, you have to go visit the Art Museum because they have an exhibition of Dr. Jack Kevorkian's paintings. So he came in, and this is very kind of dark work, like it's very political, graphic, colorful, and I know he loved it, and you know, put it on his social, and he sort of made a connection with the Art Museum here for one of the first times. And that was kind of the beginning of, the conversation of doing the show here. Serj also has a long history of involvement in Armenia, which we also have a lot of respect for. He's a very prolific person, as you know, very entrepreneurial. Every time I think I've seen everything that he's doing, there's like several more projects. Like, you know, like this month I know he's planning on releasing another book of his artwork, and he's releasing another album. He's releasing songs every Friday from a new solo album. They just finished the tour, so he's just incredibly busy and prolific, so it's really inspiring that he's able to produce so much work.
And you know, one of the things I was going to also mention too, I teach art history at Stockton, and so one of the things that baffles my students is abstract art. I don't know if you go into a museum and my dad likes to say, you could have done that when you were 5, and okay, Dad. You know, but one of the things I think is the most challenging thing about teaching abstract art is that it's not easy to recognize, right? It's not representational, it's not something that you look at and you completely understand the point. But what I think is really interesting about his approach specifically in this and Serj's approach to the show is that the work obviously has the other components that gives you a great idea of what they're about, why it's important. But I read this great quote from him and I go, oh, it totally makes sense that he chose abstraction, that is the mode in which he works in. I'm just going to read it to you because I was going to ask him a question about this anyway, so I'm going to do it here. One of the quotes that he has that I was going to talk about it was a quote that says, "My life's work has always been about learning how to deliver hard truths at difficult moments in ways people will hear them." And although I think that specifically references his political activism and his personal ideology, I also think it applies to his artwork, is that the images sometimes are hard to understand to start, right? It takes more deeper reflection, longer times to look at the work, to have a sense of what it's about. And so I think both in his music and his life and his poetry and his art, sometimes things that are at times difficult to understand become more complex and more interesting the more you see it. And so I thought there was just a really good connection between how he approaches all modes of, you know, his creativity.
I think it's important to remember too, like especially for us, you know, we work at a university, our life is revolving around education. And so to have an exhibition like this that shows the abstract art in such a different way can really educate everyone on how to view it.
You know, and I will also say that, you know, installation matters. I mean, I think that's actually a really important aspect too, is that the choices we made in terms of where things are positioned, the color on the walls, all those things factor into how seriously or how deeply you look at something. One of the things that I think affects a lot of different kinds of art is not being given the time or the space to reflect on something. I'm hoping or the flow. No, that's yeah, pace is important. And so I hope that, we can't give you all of what Serj would have said here, but what I can tell you is that we talked a lot about the installation and how your experience walking through would feel, like what it feels like to go from painting to painting, what comes first, what comes last.
What did we want you to see when you first walked in here, and what kind of feelings that was to bring to you? Things like that.
What's the last thing you read when you walked out of the room? All those things will either enhance your experience or make it awful, like honestly. And so I'm hoping...
But it's okay to have both feelings.
It's okay to have both feelings, but I'm hoping that it allows you to kind of experience the work, whether you like aspects or don't like aspects, that you're able to kind of take in the work as best as you can. And I welcome questions about that too, because I do think that's part of the process as well, is talking to curators and installation researchers to find out why it looks the way it does, because it could look completely different, and we have other exhibitions that look different of the same work, and so I think there are some choices that are made for that. Jason was very uncertain about the black paint, and we had like 5 conversations about it. I was like, let's just try it. Let's just try it. We can turn it back. And I think our last show, because of the chaos, the organized chaos of that, but I think, I want, and I was talking to someone earlier about this, I want the space to feel completely different each time you come in, that the show has its own unique personality and identity, because I think it's important. I think that is my job as a curator. That's the promise I make to each artist, that it has to be specific to them, right? It can be clean and beautiful, like Tigran's exhibit. It could be, a little chaotic and playful, like our previous exhibit. And this way, this is a little bit dramatic, and I hope that taking those risks, sometimes small, sometimes large, improves your experience as you walk through. I think it's really important to never do the same thing twice. If you're going to try it out, you might as well try it out.
Don't worry, you're not the only one she makes nervous all the time either. So.
Yeah, I mean, and again, like we have a 2-floor exhibit at exhibition space at Stockton, and I think there are a lot of times that people are like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And so far it's been okay. Yeah. So far it's been fine.
We also have, this building. This is a brutalist building. This gallery was kind of brought back to life. It used to be wall-to-wall carpeting, like very 1970s. It's a Ben Thompson building. It's great. There's another one like it on Brattle Street. A lot of concrete, a lot of glass. It's really challenging. But again, we worked with the architecture. And Ryan is used to this, because I walked into her gallery in Stockton, and her gallery's inside of it. It used to be a swimming pool. Yeah. With the same kind of fan noise overhead, and it's like, I get it.
Yeah.
So she's
the
really
walls
worked
slightly
with the
rattle a little bit when you go in.
I think that's the thing, is that you have to build out the exhibition for the space that you're in. It never looks the same. Even touring exhibits. Marcia and I have been part of an exhibit that's traveled for almost about 1.5 to 2 years, before and after reflections on Armenian genocide. And each space it goes to, it changed because the space wasn't the same. And so I think there is an understanding that you have to love the architecture, and you have to love what you have to make the best kind of exhibition. And it has to be tweaked and changed. And I love a brutalist building, so I actually really like this, but there are complications. The windows are complications, definitely, because having UV light come in, that's a little challenging. But at the same time, it does provide, for example, when we had Ara's exhibition, we had tapestries along that. So I think there's ways to use that as well. So
we do have one other thing we wanted to add at the end of the program. We have a guest here that we wanted to invite. We were talking about the intersection between art and music. So Raffi Donoian is a musician that happened to be here at our invitation, and we are going to invite him to play a song for you as part of the experience of this show. I think he's here. He's probably grabbing his guitar.
Oh, he's over there.
Oh, Raffi. Yeah. But while he's getting set up, I did want to thank all of you for signing up for this panel, for purchasing the books and the prints that Serj signed. really grateful, and I know a lot of you also signed up to become members of the museum, which is amazing. We're really proud of that people responded so quickly. I mean, this event built overnight. It was amazing. We didn't even finish, rolling out the marketing for this show, and it was filled. And it's a great crowd, even with the weather challenge. So we're really thankful for, especially to those of you who became members. Thank you for being here. So with that, I want to invite Raffi Donoian to play.